Hey, welcome everyone who's joining us. We're going to be getting started with our webinar in just a few minutes. It's not quite 5 yet. All right, I guess it's 5 o'clock right now. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar we're having. We have some panelists and videos, and I'm sure it's going to be a enlightening and hopefully motivating webinar here. So let's get started. My name is John Parker. I'm from the Socialist Unity Party and the Harriet Tubman Center for Social Justice. And I'd just like to welcome everyone to this special tribute to the heroic Attica prisoners. Tonight's forum was called by Struggle La Lucha for Socialism and the Socialist Unity Party and the Prisoners Solidarity Committee. And just want to encourage folks to, if you go to the strugglelalucha.org, and you can find many great articles on the struggle, all the news you need for the struggle, from the prisoner struggles to many other struggles. On September 9th, 1971, the prisoners of Attica heroically rose up in response to inhuman conditions of torture in one of the largest prison rebellions in US history. It took place during a growing period of ferment inside of prisons and jails, and the growing struggle for Black, Brown, and Indigenous liberation taking place outside of the prison. Prisoners put forward a list of 27 remarkable demands. After 4 short days, then Governor Nelson Rockefeller, ordered the storming of Attica prisons. With helicopters flying overhead, close to 1,000 state troopers, National Guard troops, and prison guards, they fired into the yard, killing 39 people and wounding 85 in what can only be described as a total massacre. The press screamed that the 10 captive guards who died had their throats slit, but autopsies showed that all 10 had been shot to death by Rockefeller's stormtroopers. And what happened in the immediate aftermath of the slaughter is too painful to describe. Prisoners were stripped naked, beaten, made to run through gauntlets of guards, and brutally tortured. Guards had stormed into the yard chanting "white power." Nevertheless, the Attica Uprising and the massacre stirred prisoners everywhere. It's estimated that 200,000 prisoners protested and held strikes in its aftermath. And the number of prison rebellions doubled. It continues to serve as a beacon today for those fighting against racism and mass incarceration and for workers' rights everywhere. We have 4 excellent presentations and a short video. And following that, we'll open up the floor for questions and comments using the chat and the question and answer button there. So our first presentation is by Lars Bergling, a member of the Socialist Unity Party, and they will read a poem from one of the Attica prisoners. So take it away, Lars.
Thanks, John. This is September 13th by Christopher Sutherland, poem from an Attica prisoner. Let the drums roll, give the first command that puts us in the ground. READY. We stiffen our shoulders, hold our heads up high, let the world take note that proud Black men are here, about to die. AAAIM. If our actions cause brothers and sisters to unite as we die, in their fighting spirits we live. So let the drums roll and damn that final order that puts us in the ground. FIRE.
All right. And to go along with those stirring words, thanks, Lars. We're gonna show a brief video clip of one of the original observers, Puerto Rican revolutionary and socialist Tom Soto of the Prisoners Solidarity Committee on September 9th. And prisoners had made a request for observers, and only people they trusted, and Tom Soto was one of those who they trusted to come and give witness. And this actually is a quote from the prisoners. They said, "We urgently demand immediate negotiations through William M. Kunstler, attorney at law, and Assemblyman Arthur O. Eve of Buffalo, the Prisoner Solidarity Committee of New York, Minister Farrakhan of the Muslims. We want Huey P. Newton from the Black Panther Party, and we want the chairman of the Young Lords Party. We want Clarence B. Jones of the Amsterdam News. We want Tom Wicker of the New York Times. We want Richard Roth from the Courier Express. We want the Fortune Society, Dave Anderson of the Urban League of Rochester, Brian Eva Barnes. We want Jim Hindling of the Democratic Late Chronicle of Detroit, Michigan. We guarantee the safe passage of all people to and from this institution. We invite all the people to come here and witness this degradation so that they can better know how to bring this degradation to an end. This is what we want." So now we're going to show the video.
Really as an adjunct, in my view, to the civil rights movement. There were rebellions going on throughout the country by the African American community demanding civil rights, and these rebellions often took on a very militant character. There were very radical organizations such as the Panthers, the Young Lords, the Rainbow Coalition that were emerging. There was the struggle against the Vietnam War, which is another issue. But at the same time, there was this very powerful civil rights movement which encompassed tens of millions of African American people. And it was felt very much in the prisons, which were about 85%, or in large majority, Black, Latino, minorities in general. And as a response to this growing struggle that was taking place in the prisons, specifically, I recall the Auburn prison rebellion, the Women's House of Detention, well, there were struggles at Elmira prison. There were also struggles in the Tombs in New York City. This was an uprising. This was like a military uprising. There were several tunnels that we had to go through in order to get to the liberated area, as I would call it. There were several checkpoints where the inmates had, blockades and were armed with sticks and anything they could get their hands on. They all were, wearing masks so they wouldn't be identified. And they asked us to stay in the prison with them as guarantee of their safety. The bourgeois politicians wouldn't do it, but we did. I don't recall really where I slept. I can't tell you where I slept. I just don't remember. But we did stay, and we told them yes, and they were very happy. After we went through several checkpoints and through these tunnels, we went to the main area, and it was at night. Actually, it was at night. It was a huge, huge area. You can imagine about 1,000 inmates. They had chains of guards, of security around us. Black, Latino, and white together. They were highly organized. There was a large area, negotiating table on the right, where the leaders of the rebellion, Bergling and Big Black and Chapman and others were seated. This delegation came in, which included myself, members of the Young Lords, Councillor was there, Arthur Eve, and some of the others. And they just greeted me especially. There was tremendous solidarity. They hugged. And there was a bonding. And then they took us on a tour. They took me on a tour. I was alone with them. And we went into the areas of the cells. They showed us how small the cells were. And then they explained how the harsh conditions had led to the rebellion. They explained how they were being gassed and beaten indiscriminately. They were often put into solitary confinement. They felt they were being exploited and asked to work for 10 cents an hour, producing furniture for the court system. They felt that there was a tremendous racism institutionalized against them by the white guard population. They felt that these conditions had driven them to take over the prison. Again, this rebellion was really part of a broad political current involving millions of people. The Panthers were being repressed all over the country, where they had sympathizers, members. They were being thrown into jail. They had Panther factions within the jails. For example, George Jackson, if I recall properly, was given a position within the Panther Party, and he called for recruitment. People went into the Panthers. When the civil rights movement is talked about, they usually exclude the more militant wing of the civil rights movement, which was there, and they don't properly put the prison struggle in perspective. as part of that movement. But this was really like an uprising, different from a general strike. For 5 days they held, they held territory. They didn't give it up. They didn't have any internal divisions. They stood their ground, and they said, "We're not going to give in. You're either going to kill us, or we're going to get our demands." They were solid. It was like I make an analogy to the Paris Commune like thing. When they were surrounded, they knew they were surrounded. They didn't know what was going on politically outside. They had no parties there. They had no weapons. They had no guns. They had no. But they decided they would not give in, and their sacrifice was not in vain. It inspired millions of other people outside. Their deaths will live on in history forever.
All right. So that was a testimony from our comrade Tom Soto, passed away recently. And you can tell the emotional it is to see the depth of these people and the willingness to fight, risk their own lives to better conditions for other prisoners, not only in their own cell, but other cells, and the resulting of what the state did to them. So we're going to have two presentations on the current struggle before we open up for questions and comments. And our first panelist is Yamone Fukiansi. Yamone is an organizer with the Socialist Unity Party and community activist and former veteran. He has a podcast and is an instructor and organizer assisting HIV positive peoples. Yamone will be speaking about how the Attica Rebellion reminds us of the importance of organizing incarcerated youth caught up in the prison industrial complex and now victimized by COVID-19. And thank you for being here, Yamone.
Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here. And also, if I may add, John, I'm also a newly elected member of the neighborhood council in South Central LA. I don't call it South LA as neo-colonists and the system wants us to call for the sake of gentrification. I'm newly elected. Like I said, I'm in Area 2, which is the Empowerment Congress Southeast. And my section is where I see these things that lead to the incarceration. I say mass incarceration of African, Latino ex-youth. If I may, I like to read a few statistics of the disparity or the distance of African and Latino ex-youth. And let me start with African American, for those who are not familiar or associate themselves with being African. In the state of Alabama, because I want to represent the South, and this is statistics from 2015, and I got one statistic recently, 2019, in the state I'm originally from, which is Illinois. So let me begin, if I may. In Alabama in 2015, the disparity was 294 Africans compared to 106 Caucasians, which is a 2.8% disparity. In Arizona, 240 were in Caucasian, or as we say, colonizer, 62. That's a 3.9%. In California in 2015, which I'm a resident now and was then, 433 African, 48 Caucasian. That's a 9.0. And for those of you who thrive on the fact that California is liberal and those commercials that be pushing it, come to where I live at. In 2015, it was Illinois. In 2015, California, sorry, 433 African youth, that include sisters and brothers, compared to 48 Caucasian. I read that before, 9%, but in Illinois, 2019, it's 218 African and 32 Caucasian, it's 6.8. I say that also to say that, we all are celebrating, African people are celebrating the election of Joe Biden. When I don't know if people are suffering from cognitive dissonance, but in 1994, the Clintons created the crime bill, which set up the mass incarceration of African people and the school to prison pipeline. So to me, Attica, takes me back when I read it about 1971, when I see the dramatizations of that event. I can't imagine having been there, because TV shows, like a good book, TV shows only half of what went down. So when I look at Attica, when I think about that, when it comes to COVID-19, from reports that I hear, they're not releasing prisoners. For example, they won't release Mumia for the fact of that. They won't release him, and he's suffering from diabetes and other health issues. So the capitalist system, or imperialist capitalist system, really gets upset when their cattle, as they call inmates, aka inmates, when they have their time in concentration camps, colonial penal institutions, we're still treated as if those of us who are non-incarcerated. There's really no difference. And in Attica, when you look at it today, and then not Attica itself, but the conditions of incarcerated African people, incarcerated Latino, Latinx, incarcerated, indigenous people, when it comes to quote unquote Native Americans, the treatment is the same compared to whites who align themselves with the ruling class. So Attica today was just an example of how the system has not changed, how the incarceration or the state process of what they're doing, as far as you had stated earlier, making 10 cents, like the gentleman stated, making 10 cents an hour, making furniture. I can imagine they might went up 5 cents, and that's subjective. So I don't want to not quote facts, but the aspect of the area that I work in, I see the conditions that led to Attica, poverty, food swamps, food deserts. So I mean, nothing has really changed. Attica is just a reminder of work that organizations, including, that organizations have to be more assertive. We can't turn, protesting, as the state is trying to make it, into something that, liberal societies do. Let's go out there, protest, raise a few signs, raise some hell, and then go back to normal, because we still got, political prisoners. Leonard Peltier, Enoch Coley, brother been in since, it's been in over 50 years. So what's going on now, and they're suffering isolation, they're suffering solitude, and non-medical treatment. So I know that it's important that we exercise our civil rights, if they say that, but the issue is not about civil rights, it's about human rights. And the issue is that we need to that we need to be more assertive and bring back these stories and understand the stories of today stem from the stories of yesterday. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate being here. Thank you very much, y'all.
Thank you, Yamone. Thanks. Okay, and next, let's see. I'm just having a little technical problem here. Okay, and Ms. Van Green is one of the organizers with the Prisoner Solidarity Committee. We're very fortunate to have her here. Van Green's husband, Duryea Green, has been falsely imprisoned. The People's Solidarity Committee and the People's Power Assembly and Green are leading a campaign to set him free. So you can, we're gonna hear from Ms. Green right now.
Sean, I appreciate being here today. I am part of the People's Power Assembly movement, what we do is we fight for many things. We fight for the important things as well. The movie the clip that was shown, it was very touching to me. Amani spoke in so many words that it all makes sense. Where I would add to that is, I can't say that it's worse back then because I don't know back then how it really was, but by reading, and it's very tearful and hurt by just reading it and looking at movies. But I could speak on now. Back in the 80s, it was terrible. You know, the outcome of the institutions, how nasty and dirty they were, mice infested, and they would keep the inmates there and ignore the fact of the conditions of the prisons. My husband was convicted of a crime in 2004, April the 1st, by O'Donnell Heights basketball shooting, that 2 teenagers were on the basketball court and one was injured in the knee and one was injured in the ankle. They couldn't identify him, and my husband is a 6'2" and he's 240 pounds. There's no way to miss him, but the officer at the time, now he's a detective, he went overboard with his investigation. However, he turned around this year and was arrested for kidnapping and extortion and robbery. We do a lot of movements, and we went down to the jail, the women's jail, the men's jail. I used to work behind the walls, so I know the conditions. I try to keep that from off record because of circumstances. I don't want to backfire on myself. How they treat the inmates when they lock them in places where they say that it's the hole or it is lockup, and it's nasty and dirty in there. The walls have mold on them. The bathrooms are so old. The toilets doesn't even flush anymore. So the whole time that my husband has been in there, it's almost been 19 years. He has an illness, and he needs to be treated outside of the jail. And I will speak on the rest of the men and women that is incarcerated. They have illnesses. We have lost maybe 2 or 3 women since the movement that we have done. And we were fighting for the ones that we have gotten letters from the family to release them. And at the last moment of the fight, they passed away. We've been fighting for them. When the COVID came out, they were making a mask out of shirts and pants and anything they could get their hands on because they didn't have the materials to give to the inmates to protect themselves. We had to fight to the end for them to get vaccinated. You know, Hogan made sure that everybody in his team in City Hall had their shot first, and the police officers, but didn't care really that if everybody else that was outside of them needed to be vaccinated, starting with the elderly. It's been a rough ride with the Black and brown community, the Latinos behind the walls. One of the pipes in the jail had burst, and they left them inside their cells. Once they got them out of the cells, they said the reason why they had to leave them in there, quote unquote, quotes, their understanding was they didn't want them to escape, or they didn't want them to, they opened up the doors and let them out and they get miscounted. It just was a whole bunch of bogus reasons why you would leave a human being in the prison in their cells while a pipe has burst and the cells are flooded with water. it was a whole tier. It just wasn't just one. It was the whole tier that leaked downstairs under the ones that where the incident happened. They left them in there. Once they moved them into another side of the jail that had no water. It was hard for them to get food. They couldn't use the phones. Once they have gotten the water out, which that was all they were worried about, was just getting the water out. They then put them back inside of the cells where mold had begun to grow. A lot of them had gotten sick. My husband had gotten sick from the mold, and I was writing the mayor, the governor, the district where I live. When Elijah Cummings was living, I went to his office. Everybody appointed me to different people, but nobody wanted to help, or nobody understood, or nobody wanted to hear, nobody wanted to listen. I feel like that even though that they are inmates, to them, they're still loved ones, they're still human, regardless of the circumstances that they did, if they didn't do it, if they've been convicted of a crime that the officers maybe said that they did it and didn't do. They make mistakes, they make up things, they lie. But then you have the loved ones suffering behind the walls for things that was just a lie, just to maybe get some kind of clout under your badge because you feel like that's making all these arrests and allegations. You know, I guess that make you a top officer because you locked all these people up. I don't know how that the police force goes as far as that. Our movement is we march, and we march every other weekend. If not every weekend, we do our meetings. We have the news there. We are in the streets, and just like Amani said, we can't stop. We had to keep not just one day and stop the next 2 days. We have to keep pushing, and we have to stop, because to the cities that each of us live in, people feel as if don't do it until someone dies. We have to keep doing this thing all the time until they set those free. You have people that have been incarcerated since the 50s, since the 40s, since the 30s. And now if they're still living and surviving, we're in the 2000s. Why? What means to keep holding them? Why hold them in prison for so many years? And the thing that I appreciate that Biden is doing is that he's getting them released. He's getting lifers released, but he's setting up programs for them to get into, because they have been in prison for so long that they then became cell shock of being behind the walls and just doing things in one way. The lights have changed, the streets have changed, the houses have changed, time has changed. But I am fighting to the hardest to get my husband out, and not just him, innocent and wrongfully convicted men and women like my husband, especially men and women that has illnesses behind the walls now. They're not getting the proper care that they need or they should be getting, because you have the infirmary in there. They just medication back to the cell, not checking them by blood, not checking them by urine. They're not even licensed to really do but so much. And this is why they are, they need to be either out of the jail, or you do the proper steps that need for them to get the care. And the reason that they won't take them out to go get the care is because it costs too much for them to get out of there, to go to area hospitals to get seen. My husband was bleeding so much that his skin started looking dull and dark to me, and he was getting so weak that I was fighting Miss Sharon. We did a movement, and the movements that we have been doing and we have been pushing, they finally gotten him out of the jail and took him to Bon Secours Hospital, where they were treating him. But at this point, he needs to be released, because you can't help him with the circumstances that he needs. He needs better care. And when I speak for him, I speak for all of them, the men and women, the the Black and brown community, the Latinos, all of them that has an illness or sickness. Release them if you're not going to be fair to treat them.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Green. It's the stories and perspectives and stories we don't see on TV, we don't see in the movies, we don't see on the media. It's hidden. And it's up to us to bring the type of solidarity that's going to be necessary to bring our sisters and brothers and non-gender conforming others back home to us, especially during this COVID-19 crisis.
I wanted to say, John, if I may interrupt,
yeah,
Conrad. It's just
go ahead. Then we're going to have a question and answer from everybody.
Right on. I just, the struggle to some people is too real, and I can understand that because I've been doing the work since I was 25 and I'm 55 years of age. And I implore those who have the experience to please come back into the movement. I mean, even if it's just to advise, because believe it or not, imperialism is losing. The more that they do crazy acts, the more they create what they call a Hegelian dialect, creating situations, to have the people vote for their own oppression. Those of us who are educated, it's not an issue, when it comes to the issue of race, but also it's an issue of class, because it's the haves and have-nots. I mean, I'm not a liberal, but you got to understand that it's a system that we fight. So whether if we are African, whether we are quote unquote born in America, African or Latin, or Asian, I mean, it's a worldwide struggle. So when you take it back to aspect of Attica, when you take it back to the aspect of, what happened in Wounded Knee, when you look at the story or his story, the colonialism story, the system is working, so they haven't changed. The question is, as Kwame Ture said, or people know him as, Stokely Carmichael, he stated that if you are out here organized, join an organization, because everybody's needed on deck in this struggle. So when we look at the Library of Liberation story, it's just not relegated to African, it's just not relegated to, fighting white people, or the pig. It's to overthrow the system. And what I want to make that clear, when I say overthrow, yes, Miles said revolution comes at the end of a gun, but just as we said in this webinar, we're looking at issues of medical, basic human rights. I could say crackers run this stuff, but then you got neo-colonialist Africans, sellouts, as people would call them, assist. So the struggle has gotten bigger. And so I say to the old heads, such as myself, I include you to impart in us that energy. But as old heads, we impart that wisdom into the youth. So I implore the youth who are watching, I implore the women who are watching, I implore that college student, that doctor. Hell, if you're a lawyer or like me, I'm an official of this, I'm a city official. That cracks me up because everything that this system stands for, I plan to upset it, be a pain in the ass. So I tell you, if you are a teacher, teach children about their rights, no matter where they at, because the issue is not black or white. That's an excuse. It's the issue of haves and have-nots, and we have the power. The people have the power, and I'll leave with this. Fred Hampton said, "I don't hate white people, I hate oppression." And that's the mindset we have to have today, because even within the struggle, there's too much compartmentalism. I have to talk slow, y'all. I'm not a college kid. I'm just a regular working class. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Yeah, that's said a whole bunch there. It just makes me think, they're always trying to fool us in different ways, try to make us forget about history so you don't know how to advance. And one of the ways to do that is to say, don't work with the older folks. Don't work with them. They're telling the older folks, you can't trust the young folks, can't trust the old folks, and they keep us divided, and meanwhile we could come together And like some people, old folks like me and other folks that, you know, maybe we're not have all the energy and everything, but you got a lot of information that could be useful to those with the energy. And we gotta come back together as a family, generationally. Let's get to some questions and answers here. I'm looking and I'm looking. I don't see one yet. But for any of our panelists, questions. But in the meantime, you know, we also talked about Paris Commune, and we said this was like the Paris Commune. And folks who don't know, you know, the Paris Commune that happened in France in 1871. There's a lot of similarities between Attica and the Paris Commune because it was a rebellion against conditions of drastic want, partly because of the imperialist war France was just involved in. And much like the imperialist wars of the United States, how they deprive us, and especially those most in need, like the incarcerated, from basic necessities of survival and decency. The Paris Commune showed the world what the government, what a real government, a government for the people, could look like in terms of real democracy, ensuring the needs of the most vulnerable and declaring education, equality, and especially food and shelter as a right to humanity. See, they took control. They had a military takeover in France, and they took control for about 3 months. They held and they set up their government. They set up the equality of women, and they set up, you know, they did all of the things. They made sure that everybody had the right to the basic necessities, like I was saying before. But of course, you know, like the Attica Rebellion, it's an example that's too dangerous for the ruling class. So it can be accepted by capitalism or imperialism or any monarchies or anything. So they had to try to crush it. They had to wipe it out. Like they did to the Attica prisoners who were massacred in 15 minutes with automatic weapons. You know, they did the same thing and wiping out the people of France who were, but they couldn't wipe out, you know, that example, and it still remains and it still inspires. So just like Attica, it still inspires. So do we have any questions here? So I can stop running my mouth here. Well, we have a question from Lee in Baltimore. It says, how do we get our class to divorce themselves from bourgeois democratic politics to understanding that we are in a class war against imperialism? So anybody from Lars or Miss Green or Yamone would like to take
I always got
on?
something to say, John, when it comes to revolution. I would love to answer that question.
Let me, since you just spoke, let me just make sure Lars or Miss Green, all right, go ahead, Yamane.
Okay, that's a good question. It's a hard question, and the answer is even more clear because a lot of people, you know, my experience, I'm not speaking on everybody. That will be up to the person. That will be up to the individual who feels they want to do something. Because in the age that we live in, you're going to have to lose something to gain something. It's what we call dialectical materialism. In order for something to grow, stuff must, and I'm paraphrasing, fam. Something has to die. And the whole idea of fear, the whole idea of powerlessness, the whole idea that you're not educated or that you don't know enough, that's not, let that subjective or personal energy dissipate, because even all of us who were born, we didn't come out of our mother's womb knowing how to walk, eat, crap, none of that. So same as revolution. But to answer the question more specifically in a sociological term, those who are petty boo, you have to, there's a word called class suicide. Everything that you stand for or learn, you have to unlearn. It's just that simple. It's not overnight. You don't have to go to college to get it. If you can read and go to a library, man, you're going to one of the world's greatest armories, because knowledge is power. But knowledge without power is useless. And that's the point. We got all these people who know shit, but not doing shit. And second, and most importantly, those who ain't doing shit, don't worry about it. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about what they don't. Do what you do. That's the whole point. Fred Hampton said it. You can kill the revolutionary, but you cannot kill the revolution. And believe me, the revolution is alive and kicking, and it's calling for sacrifice. That's a hard word to hear, but because people don't want to do it. They want to compromise, but they don't want to sacrifice. So to answer that question, if you want to split yourself a petty bourgeoisie stuff, do what I did. Quit it. Hook up, arm yourselves, empower yourselves. Malcolm did it. Fred did it. Any leader, Thomas Sankara is perfect. Ordinary dude, became president of Guinea. What's that word, John? You got it. Yeah. But that's it. Ordinary people are going to make it happen. Bob Marley said, moving other people. So if you're willing to commit class suicide, that's the first step. And find comrades who support that. And believe me, it's going to be small. Like Sister Green is saying, I don't hear anybody helping her. I hear her doing it, you know, and it's her husband, but assist her. You know, if you see old lady crossing the street, help. I can go on, but yeah, commit class. And if you're Caucasian, that would be class and national suicide, because you know, effective capitalism is the foundation. Racism is the foundation of capitalism. So my definition is that for white people who want to be approved by the ruling whites, they oppress us. You dig? So I mean, racism is just something that's not really important. The issue is class. So white people, if you want to get on board with us, you got to commit class and national suicide. And that's a heavy menu. Thank you, John.
Yeah, so I think Ms. Green had a hand up there.
Amani spoke the words clearly. Enough said. And must I add to that, we have a lot of people that speaks out on things that maybe from what they hear or maybe from what they saw, but until you get into it with us, until you make movements with us, until you stand with us and don't stand behind us, this is what's going to keep happening constantly over and over. It won't stop. We have to come to the streets. It may not be you in your situation, but we have family members, like my husband himself. He's been accused. He's 55 years old. You think I want him to stay in jail until he's 70 or late 70s? That's not going to happen. Myself, the PPA, we don't care how many people it is. We get out there and we fight through the struggles, and we use the necessary tools that we have to work with. But if we keep pushing, if we keep marching, if we keep having movements, somebody will hear the voice, somebody will see the motions and the movements, and they will understand. Don't be against us, be for us. You don't want something to happen in your favor because it happened in your family or it happened to a loved one that you know. Let's not wait for that to happen. Let's do it now. You know, people forget about people behind those walls. You forget. You can't forget the people behind the walls because of something that you heard or something that you assume. You know, the news confuses us. They confuse our mind to think that this person is a monster. This person is a menace to society. You know, you want to fight for people that is in prison that are dying because you assume what they did because that's what you heard what they did. You have to fight for those people. Forget about the people that's in prison. We more at war out here on the streets than the ones that's in prison. You think that's going to hurt you. I feel like that you're treating human beings. I disagree with any human being being shackled and in chains. I disagree with that. But that's the way that the ropes go. That's the way that it turned out. Whatever idea, whoever idea came up with. You know, I can't think of his name because this is so hurtful and painful just for me to even speak about it. You know, and I didn't really get into it myself to understand it. I had loved ones in there, but they didn't stay with time. They didn't really get accused of crimes that, you know, people made them to be a monster. The media made them to be, you know, monsters. But if my husband had never gotten to this situation, would I have understood it to get out here and fight with Ms. Shern and her team and the PPA? I became a board when I had to get knowledge and educated by the whole system. You know, I'm learning as I go with the law. My husband don't have a huge family. Everybody in his family is elderly, you know, so he has nothing but me to fight and support. And I've been fighting since day one. I'm going to stay by his side. I'm going to stick by his side, and I'm going to speak his truth. I didn't pay 2 attorneys that everything that they didn't do, I'm doing right now. Attorney took $10,000 from me, and he just sat there and did nothing. His post-conviction, the lawyer, the second attorney that did his post-conviction, he wasn't supposed to do law. And when it was all said and done, and he was supposed to did it and came back in the second recess, he didn't show up. But the first attorney, after the case was over, originally the courts offered my husband 10 years. I paid you $10,000. You wanted 20. You said you'll take 10,000. I gave that to you. It wasn't easy. I worked 3 full-time jobs to give you $10,000, and I'm a single mom raising 3 children. And when me and my husband was out here, we was a team. I have 3. He have 2 children. You know, and I don't separate them. They are my children. So we have a total of 5 kids. But at the end of the day, I'm taking away from bills and to sacrifice for him, to fight for him to get out of there. And you couldn't face me after the courts was over. They even locked me up for saying that I threatened a witness. That never happened. But they released me because nobody heard me threaten a witness. Let's just say that they believe that. Let's just say that they honestly said, you know what, she did it. Because that's how the system works. That's how the system portray us to be. We're gonna always be enemies to the system. We're gonna always be whatever kind of name to the officers or whomever feel like they the highest. But my husband was wrongfully convicted. When I went into the background of this officer, he did all kinds of things, but he was still an officer. He was still a detective. He did everything that he was big enough to do under the sun. And it took for a hardworking man to show the type of officer, detective that you were. This man was working on his house, and you didn't like the work that he did because you wanted to.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Ms. Green.
Heard about Detective
Okay.
James Lloyd. James Lloyd was the detective at the time who did the kidnapping and extortion to a hardworking man that did work on his house. Work. And so he took him to the bank after putting handcuffs on him and told him you didn't have license.
I think the your internet is cutting out. So we're not hearing you right now. At least I'm not. Is anybody else? Anybody hearing the screen?
No, John, I'm not hearing.
Yeah. Ms. Green, if you can hear me, you're
frozen.
Cut out.
Yeah, she's frozen. Her network needs to be.
But while you're out, there was a question for you though. I don't know if you can hear me. Ms. Green, you're back? Yeah, there's something with the internet. Okay, but while that's happening, there is another question for you, Ms. Green, when you get up about actually what you were talking about. What's the particulars about how your husband was framed up?
She's back, John.
Are you back?
Yeah, she's back. I'm looking at her.
Back. Okay. Listen, could you? There's a question about talking about the frame up or what happened during the frame, or what the particulars are of the frame up for you. And then while you're explaining that, I wanted to, see if to put the question another way. That's the question before about how do you get people from just depending on the bourgeoisie. Is just I wanted to ask, Lars, you're a younger activist and been an activist for a while. I say a little bit, I mean a while. And I know people have come up to you and said, why are you doing this? Why don't you just, run for office or support this candidate or do something like that? Why don't you do some real work? I was just wondering how you answer that. But first, let's go back to Ms. Green.
John, you were frozen for a minute there. I only heard brief of what you were speaking.
Oh, there was a question for you about the frame up, about what happened.
So it was a shooting at O'Donnell Heights in 2004. It was two teenagers at the time. One was shot in the knee and one was shot in the ankle. When the shooting took place, it was numerous things going on out the O'Donnell Heights area. If you know anything about what you guys don't, Cherry Hill is a dark area, neighborhood. It's technically a projects, and that's what O'Donnell Heights is. It's not good lighting out O'Donnell Heights. And so again, I explained my husband is 6'2" and he's 240 pounds. And so when it happened that night, he was nowhere there. The next day when he went to go visit a friend who were trying to move their self out of there, it was a friend of ours that we both knew. She was trying to move her children from that neighborhood and she was trying to move. They vandalized her car. So when they vandalized her car, she was trying to move. She called the police. The argument got heated with the neighbors that was across the street from her. Her kids did it because whatever reason, I can't say why they did it, but it happened. And so we took her and her children to our home until it calmed down. But when she went back home, her all her windows in her home was broke out. Because me and my husband was in there trying to help her, it got heated. So the police came out, we left. They identified him as a 5'8", 5 feet man that was, 5'8", medium built with hair. And so when the two were shot, one of them, I can't say their names, but let's just say Life said, I couldn't identify him. The other one said, well, my mom told me to say that he did it because I couldn't see because it was too dark and we were on the basketball court. And so when it was all said and done, the detectives, I guess they were calling my husband Dirk, but that's not his name. His real name is Duryea. For short, we call him Dury. And so they came up with Dirk, they came up with Daryl, all kinds of names. But when the detective got involved, I guess he was threatening, as they do, they were threatening the witnesses at the time. So however they got my address, they ran it through the car. At the time, we had a 2006 Volvo. And I guess when he came back around there, someone screenshotted the tags. That's how he was able to get to our address because the vehicles were in my name. And so they came to the address, they wanted to speak. My husband said he was not going to speak to them until, he don't have to. They came back again. We still wouldn't speak. Now he comes back, but for warrant, and my husband was at work. He put handcuffs on me, taking my children to school. My husband was doing construction at the time, so they go on different sites. They take them to different sites where I don't know where they take them at. However, Detective James Lloyd must have did a search or homework because when he put the handcuffs on me, I'm riding all the way out to Lansdale, Maryland with handcuffs on me like I had killed somebody or I was under arrest. I kept asking him, if I'm not under arrest, you didn't read me my rights, why do you have handcuffs on me? At the time when we gets out to the job, they called my husband to the office. When he came to the office, they grabbed him. Now they're charging him with second-degree assault, attempted murder, something like that. I don't know how to frame it, but the charges are that. And we were fighting for him to go to court. But till this day, the two young men that were shot when they were 13 and 15, they're now grown now, and they're in prison themselves for murder. Both of them are in prison for murder. But the whole nutshell is Detective James Lloyd was threatening the witnesses, and my friend, he was threatening her and taking her kids if she didn't say that my husband did it. And at the time, he was offered 10 years before I had gotten a lawyer. Now I'm getting a lawyer, the one I paid $10,000 to, because he said, this is bogus. You know how they talk, a good game, just to get your money. So I paid him the money. What he was talking, what he was speaking about, he didn't talk it when we got in court. Now my husband ends up with 45 years, and that's the years that he has now.
Wow, I'm so sorry. Wow. Well, that just goes to this other question I just had. It just seems, the politicians don't do a damn thing except enable this system. But I wanted to go back to that because you all are working in organizations and an organization in Baltimore that's very active. And I know you all take a lot of heat in the People's Power Assembly and other things, and you've done some great work, including the unemployment, ensuring that 180,000 people are now getting their unemployment benefits that the governor was trying to deny. And so you're all on the ground. So I just wanted to see if I wanted to get kind of more of the youth perspective on what do you say when people tell you, what you're doing doesn't matter and what you're doing is foolish. You should just vote for so-and-so or run for office or all that kind of thing. So I kind of want to see if Lars wanted to, what's your answer to that?
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that. I mean, you touched on
Besides
it.
punching them in the face.
No, I mean, you just summed it up pretty well with your line, politicians enable the damn system. And isn't that true? It's a very much a simplification of things, I think, when people tell you to just vote, vote your troubles away. Things, I think, especially nowadays in the capitalist system, when so many of us are online and so many of us are more aware of what really goes on out there in things like the government and abroad in the consistent, wars, the economy, all of these things. People are aware that these things are happening, and they're also aware of what gets things done. It's very easy, especially I think recently we've seen, a number of high profile candidates, so-called progressives who have, really stirred folks that have been organizing, and I'm not saying, you shouldn't, vouch for whatever thing that this politician does that's a good thing that helps people on the front lines. I'm not saying that at all. However, it always goes deeper than just what these people say, very blatantly. And I think it's very much a thing that we see, that these folks are very, very intent on dividing people up, when in reality, we should be recognizing the similarities that we have while maintaining the fact that we all have a unique perspective to offer to people. For example, to that point, I know I'm rambling a bit, but I myself am a queer person. I'm very proud of that fact. And as of late, there's been a big push, especially in liberal circles, to recognize that. And there's been, especially in the Democratic Party and whatnot, I've seen a very big push to, promote tolerance, promote respect. But I think what's really missing from that conversation on that front is, the issue of class, the issue of, the economic standing. It's great that you want to recognize, that gay people, trans people, non-binary people, all these different folks are human. But when we need healthcare, when we need, when we get laid off of work and we don't have, when our unemployment checks aren't coming through, suddenly everybody's very quiet. Suddenly nobody wants to do anything. And that's not, and once you recognize that this is happening to yourself, I think a lot of people get very interested in looking at their issues as just an issues that their group faces. But, I know that's not true. And I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to the fact that it's not just my group that is facing all of this stuff that's going on in the world. It's you, it's me, it's the Black folks, it's the brown folks, it's the people overseas in the Middle East, it's all of these people. And it is tough because I think we are still in that stage where people are not recognizing how all these groups come together, but I really do think more and more that it's coming. And I think that we will see the biggest impact and the biggest change, and we will start to see those things once people really recognize and wake up to the, to the standing that I am not the only person that is human, that deserves these rights. We are all here, and every single one of us, deserves these rights. And some of us are more predisposed to being screwed over by the system than others. And that's not saying that you aren't facing your own issues, but it is a combination of recognizing that some of us are more marginalized in certain areas than others, but also that we need to come together for every single one of us. And that's all I have to say on that.
That's all you have to say?
Please jump.
That's a lot. I don't mean long, I mean wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks, Lars. Thank you so much, because you hit on very, very pertinent points, particularly when you stated the aspect of people compartmentalizing their oppression. As Fred said, and as we know, no matter what generation, you come to that mindset that oppression is oppression, because the aspect is that I'm part of the community as well. I don't identify straight or anything, I identify as me, and I relate to all people. And I like the fact that it came from a young person, what has to be done, because because regardless of what your bag is, it all adds up to one word: oppression. And that's what's happening, to hear a young person say that, because even it surprises me that there are queer people, I'm new to the aspects, I'm learning the vernacular of, queer, binary. Good thing I know how to read so I can educate myself. But it's good that you said it, because oppression affects everybody, because even in the movement, there are people who have prejudices that need to be cleared up. And I like the fact you point out the reasons why. So, I mean, I so appreciate what you just said. I so appreciate it. Thank you, Lars. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to add to that. The movement that the PPA does, we kind of touch bases with, I'm not going to use the word kind, we are strong. We stand by our word. We reach out to many. We are the organization is spreading. We are doing. We come from a nonprofit. The things that you think that we do, you would think that we had a bank full.
You're muted. The screen, you're muted.
You pay attention to something being free, or you pay attention to a club, or you pay attention to buying hair, or you pay attention to things that's not nonsense. To me, it's nonsense. Especially when we did the life that we're living now. Everybody needs to read. That's the most important part of life. You have to read to be educated. Don't listen to the next door neighbor, because what he feel and think is not your opinion. It's not what you feel. It's not what you're thinking. So what's for you, what's for him may not be for you. But what we do every single day, every Saturday, we have meetings. We do things like the Zoom. We talk about things. We come together at the office. We will not stop. We are in the streets. Our boots are always on the ground. We're on the radio station. We make movements. Our hands are on everything that's possible, that we are trying to reach the inner self for them to hear our voice. We are always firm of what we are doing. We are fighters to the end. We are true fighters to the end. We don't wait for things to happen. We push. You know how we know it's happening? Because we read. We know what our next level is. We know what our next push is. We know what our next fight is. And each time that we're out in the streets, guess who come to our organizations? Channel 2 News and Channel 11. They know that we are pushers. We're going to push our way through. And believe it or not, it's more women than it is men pushing. But we are firm. Sharon Black, we call her the queen. She gets out there and she push and she shove, and she's going to continue to do that. And we are 100% behind her. We don't wait for things to happen. The unemployment fight that we are pushing for the people in Baltimore City to get their unemployment, Hogan is really being a bully, and his secretary are not giving those people who are losing their homes, their cars, they are losing everything that they work hard for every day. But Hogan is saying it's jobs available, but what job? Who wants to work for $10 an hour when you're used to making 20 and 30,000 a year, or you're past minimum wage, and you want these people to working at Walmart? That's not going to pay no kind of bill for these people, and they living in mansions and big houses that sits on a hill. That people are losing because you're not giving them the unemployment. That's what they work for. Since we have been pushing for these people, some of them have been getting their money. The pro bono attorney that we have, he's a pusher. He's on the news fighting by himself. You would think that he would have tons of attorneys behind him to get these people their money. We can't pay the attorneys if the people don't have money to give them to fight. So he may have 4 or 3 attorneys behind him, but Alex Somerville, he's a pusher by himself. And some of the people have gotten their money, more than enough gotten their money. But we won't stop until everybody gets their money.
All right. And we're running out of time here on our webinar a little bit, but I really want to thank the panelists for everything you did. And on if you're in Baltimore and you want to be part of the struggle, there's many organizations like the Organization of People's Power Assembly, the Socialist Unity Party. If you're in other places, if you're in LA, we're active, and we're active all over the country. But the more there are that join us, the more there are that join the struggle. Join our like what Yamone said, join whatever organization you feel comfortable with. Join an organization and let's work together in this struggle. And just to bring it back to the prison, to the Attica for a second, just this happened during a growing movement that was occurring. Groups were organizing, the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the Nation of Islam, the 5 Percenters, many other folks were organizing. The movement was building, and that's in the context of when this Attica rebellion happened, and then George Jackson was gunned down by the racist guards, and that pulled a lot of the forces in the prisons together. They united amongst religions, nationalities, and political factions. They came together, and we have to ask ourselves about the conditions now. Like what Ms. Green is saying, we see things haven't changed, and the conditions are as horrible in the prisons today. So what's going to happen when a Leonard Peltier or Mumia Abu-Jamal or Rochelle McGee or others are killed in prison or die in prison? Will that spark the next uprising? But most importantly, will the movement be ready to provide the necessary amount of solidarity to keep them safe? If there was enough solidarity and eyes on those Attica prisoners, they couldn't have done what they did. So we've got to build the movement in solidarity with our sisters and brothers and others inside of the prisons. So on that, I want to thank the panelists for everything that they said. It was really inspiring, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Just want to say, remember my cousin Ernie Davis, who served 28 years in Angola prison. He was involved in the 1971 shootout with the pigs. He was a member of the New Orleans original Panther. My cousin Abraham Bolden, the first Black man to serve in the Secret Service in 1968, was incarcerated 8 years for proving that the Warren Commission report was bullshit. Excuse my French, but let's just call it real. So yes, I appreciate this webinar that you and the Queen did, and I appreciate Sister Green being here, because people romanticize and glamorize the Panthers and every movement, but get involved, people, because we can win this. We can beat capitalism once you know how it works.
Yeah. Thank you. I said, I'll see you in the next webinar. I should have said, we'll see you in the streets. All right.